I think it's really critical today that we have a conversation about what role we're actively playing, not just in the way that you use AI as marketers, but also how you help tell the story of AI so that people who end up engaging with it understand the responsibilities that come with using it.
Thank you, Matt. Mic's on. We've had an amazing day today, and throughout the whole day, AI has come up. So from digital transformation to coding with Stack Overflow, to climate change, to vaccine development, to advertising, AI has and will continue to accelerate progress and saving our lives. So today I have an amazing panel, and I myself have been working with a few startups that deal with AI, and in fact developing a course for young people that involves ChatGPT. Introductions with AVIAD first.
Thank you, everyone. Really great to be here. And actually, I had the chance to read this article as well, so I consider myself an expert in AI as well now. My name is AVIAD ALMAGOR. I'm the Vice President of Technology at Trimble. And actually, I'm an architect by profession, the real type of architect, those who are drawing with pencil, designing buildings, not system architect or something like this. But I crossed the line to the software industry many, many years ago, and I'm working today with Trimble. Trimble, simply put, improving the way we live, move, and eat. So we serve very conservative, traditional industries, construction, agriculture, transportation, geospatial. And we develop hardware and software solutions which improve their efficiency and the quality and their footprint in the kind of environment. So that's a short introduction.
Thank you, Aviad. One fun fact, Aviad has spent more time on a plane than in an office in the past year.
Talking about sustainability.
Liz, you're next.
Oh, can you hear me now? I can hear myself. We're doing well. All right. Good to see you all this afternoon. I'm Elizabeth KIEHNER. You can call me Liz because we're best friends now. I'm Chief Growth Officer at Nortal. Nortal is a company you may not have heard of before. Please do not confuse us with Nortel, the telco company that is now bankrupt. That is not me. I am Nortal. Nortal is short for Nordic Talent. We come from the same part of the world as the beloved Spotify. Not exactly Sweden, but not too far away, Estonia. And we have offices here in Seattle, in the US, throughout Europe and the Middle East. We do some work in Africa as well. But we lead in the area of digital transformation and eGov. So I can talk a lot about AI from many different dimensions, from my time at IBM to my time at Nortal. The country of Estonia actually adopted their AI policy in 2019, and their AI policy even has a name. It's called CRAT. So I can tell you more about that and many other things later. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Liz. Fun fact, she wrote a graphic novel called Good Girls Don't Make History.
I'm gonna need a copy of that. Hello, everyone. My name is X. Yes, just the letter. I recently left my position at Google, where I spent 3.5 years in the responsible AI ML fairness space. At Google, I created the skin tone research team, which was responsible for teaching AI how to actually see black and brown skin tones. So if any of you saw those Pixel 6 commercials where they were like, real tone, trying to show you how the camera was better at capturing different skin tones, well, that team used my research team's technology. I'm here today and really honored to be at Columbia. I tried to go here, but ended up at Cal. So go Bears all day. But I'm really excited to be here today to talk to you about not just the ways in which AI is being used in industry, as I worked across all of Google's products, including Google Cloud, working with Google Cloud customers to make sure their algorithms were fair, but the things that we need to consider to make sure this technology is helping us and not harming us.
So much has changed, but we've come a ways. AI just didn't start yesterday. AI has been happening for many years. And I learned from Liz that she was working at IBM on Watson. So let's go back in time and bring us to the present really quickly. Liz, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, so when I first became fascinated with Watson, I think it was 2014, and I owned my own design agency at that time. I was working with a production company, Radical Media, on doing a documentary about IBM Watson and the Jeopardy challenge. In the process of producing this documentary, I fell in love with not Watson necessarily, but with the concept of AI. And I realized that advanced analytics, data science, where that whole industry was going, was something that I needed to get closer to and understand more about. And it was something that I believed then would fundamentally change the way that we live and work, which we see demonstrated today is exactly the case. So what I did was make a crazy decision to sell my shares of the company that I owned to my business partner and left and went to IBM, where I was for 5.5 years. And there we worked on many different things, such as a collaboration with Bon Appetit magazine and created Chef Watson. Watson made music. Watson did many, many things, a collaboration with MSK in the oncology space. Some things were successful, some things were not so successful, but it was the beginning that started, I think, paving the way to where we are today, after which I did have a chance to work at Memorial Sloan Kettering myself, and I think they have subsequently in-house made their own breakthroughs as of recent in the AI space. So I think we've seen a lot of progress across all of the different technology companies. Obviously, generative AI and ChatGPT are all of the rage today, but this has been a long, long time coming. And I think now is the time that I encourage everybody to really get educated and not just caught up in the hype, because we are in control of the destiny here as much as we feel like things are happening to us. I think that it's we as business owners, we as citizens have to take the power into our own hands at this point and not let this wave of generative AI, sort of roll over us. It has a huge potential for our society to progress and advance, and our businesses to progress and advance, but we need to do so ethically and morally as well.
Thanks, Liz. AVIAD, in your industries, how have you seen it come and accelerate at this point?
It's actually started with the needs of our customers, the industries I described earlier. There is a labor shortage problem, there is disconnected workflows, visibility challenges which kind of prevent trust between the team members. And we were looking for technology which will help automate and predict the future for the customers. And AI was certainly a good direction to explore, and several years ago we started to develop AI-based solutions. So just to give you an example, AI assist design tools for architects, where you start your design in your 3D modeling application and the system help you with IDs and with similarities that can be identified in libraries. Or selective spraying in agriculture, which is about identifying in real time the weeds in the field and making the decision if to spray or not to spray, improving the environmental impact, saving cost. Again, it's about prediction. What we see today with the kind of generative AI is more than just automation and prediction. It's really about prescription. It's about creating new content, and I'm sure we'll discuss it later in more details.
Great. So we saw Liz mention saving lives of cancer all the way back then until this day. AI is going to help feed us, and has been, but it's going to get even better. Google is an OG in the area of AI. So are you, even though you're not very old. Talk to us, about what you've seen over the past 5-10 years.
I've seen a mix of AI that's been really, really helpful in terms of moving forward and augmenting human limitations. So whether that's doctors who are reviewing x-rays and their eyes start to get tired and maybe they miss a hairline fracture, or they're looking at MRI images for things like breast cancer, or looking at MRIs of the eyes to detect diabetic retinopathy, and maybe they just happen to miss it. Maybe they were stressed out that morning or something and they just can't see it. So then you build these algorithms that can detect these types of conditions so much more consistently than human eyes can. And so then they become an augment to the way that those doctors operate. And we actually worked with the NHS, the National Health System out in the UK, to be able to help them develop algorithms to be able to detect diabetic retinopathy that they then deployed across, worked with in partnership with other governments, they deployed across India. But I've also seen algorithms do really scary, terrifying things. Right now in the US, in 14 states, there are algorithms that are being used in the CPS, or Child Protective Services system, to determine whether or not a child should be taken from their home. Way back in 2015, I think it was, those algorithms were found to be so biased by the city of Chicago that the entire state of Illinois canceled their contract, but they're still being used to this day. Because there's no law, no regulations for how an algorithm has to be tested before it gets turned on. There was a big article that came out, I think 2020, that United Healthcare Group had created an algorithm to determine who needed to see a specialist, right? And they determined this based on how much you had previously spent on that condition. Well, lo and behold, poor people who have less access to quality medical care, which just happened to skew towards certain racial groups, black and brown, ended up not being able to see the doctor as much. So the algorithm was determined to have given treatment to healthy white patients every single time over sicker black and brown patients. And so I've seen these algorithms be used as a superhero when it comes to saving cancer or augmenting our creative capabilities, where an architect might get stuck and just need that extra boost to get their imagination going again. And I've seen them do terrible things that aren't talked about in media beyond just the sensational, oh, this is an offensive Google search result, that are actually causing real harm. And I think it's really critical today that we have a conversation about what role we're actively playing, not just in the way that you use AI as marketers, but also how you help tell the story of AI so that people who end up engaging with it understand the responsibilities that come with using it.
That's a great point. We could spend more time on that later with your questions as well. But in the meantime, let's illuminate AI. AI is sort of vague sometimes when we can't sort of visualize it. So, AVIAD, tell us one of the best use cases you have for AI in your industry.
Yeah, so I mentioned two of them already, supporting architects with the early design phase, but I want to expand on this because it's my legacy as an architect. Topic which is very exciting, but imagine not just talking about generative AI, not just supporting the architect in the design with some kind of basic tools, but helping the designer generate hundreds of alternatives with a set of prioritized attributes. If it's important to you to put the sustainability in the top, or material usage, or schedule, or cost, or design style, and you can accept the system to deliver a set of design alternatives to help optimize the process and accelerate the design. In general, our customers are looking for automation of workflows, acceleration of processes, and those two key aspects are critical, and AI can certainly help with. Moving into transportation, for example, there was a huge challenge of optimizing the shipper-carrier relations and how to find, for example, the optimal route for a truck. Imagine hundreds of thousands of trucks moving around here in the US, how we can optimize this process, how we can take thousands of parameters like driver preferences, warehouse opening hours, road condition, weather, regulations. All this stuff should be computed together and provide an optimized result, which will help us save on fuel, improve the life balance of the employees, and of course, the profit of those companies. So an example from the transportation. Another example from the geospatial market, Caltrans, the Department of Transportation in California, mapping all the roads with point clouds. Point clouds, I'm not sure you're familiar with this technology. It's a set of points located in the kind of spatial environment, accurately located, so representing the real world. But how we can take this huge amount of data and make a meaning out of it. Using AI, we can do the segmentation of the point cloud. We can create semantic models out of point clouds and really provide the decision maker with valuable data. And maybe last, robotics. Trimble is heavily invested in automation and in autonomy for heavy machinery, off-road machines. Imagine a dozer, a compactor, how we can help simulate and train those machines so when they arrive to the field, they are ready to be used. Creating synthetic environment using AI and enabling those simulations to work almost as in real world, provide us a way to accelerate the design of the robotic systems and the sensor fusion technologies required to support them.
Excellent, thank you. Liz?
Yeah, for me, I spent a lot of time, especially my last role, looking at different AI solutions for hiring. And maybe some people in the room have experience with this, because if you're sifting through thousands of resumes, it's much easier to have a hand in doing that. There was actually an article that came out today in Bloomberg Law that was talking about how states are starting to regulate themselves because there is no federal guidance on using AI for hiring. So looking at Illinois, looking at Maryland, looking at New York, these are 3 states that are taking it upon themselves to figure out how to provide the right level of guidance where there is none. And this is obviously where there's been a lot of demonstrated, like, very, very blatant bias and in some cases blatant racism in the hiring process that's been uncovered. So I think that there's both great opportunities still to be gleaned there, but I think we need to be very, very careful. We've also worked in Estonia on creating an AI support tool, Hans, that has helped to streamline the work of the parliament. So again, if you look at parliamentary work or any legal process, you could have reams and reams of documents, legal precedents to go through, and the time it takes for humans to do that versus AI, it can save you an extraordinary amount of time. I think it is taking menial tasks and helping you accelerate them or augment them. As many people, we were joking about this earlier before we started the panel, that a couple of years ago, the term augmented intelligence became very popular because it sounded, I guess, less scary. But I think, again, as we do this, we need to understand who is training the AI or the algorithms. And I gave an intentionally provocative TED Talk a couple of years ago that was called, "Does Watson Believe in God?" The punchline of that story was, it depends on whose instance of Watson you're asking the question, "Watson, do you believe in God?" So not all AI is created the same or equal, and whatever instance you ask, it may give you a totally different answer depending on who trained it. So these are some of the levels of nuance that we need to think about when we enter these conversations.
I heard you say AI might be able to make government more efficient. Did I hear that right? Is that a dream that we can sort of uphold?
Yes, maybe one day. My secret goal is to bring the talents of my company to the federal government of the United States, but
yay, bring
we'll
it
see.
on. Bring it on. Okay, X, go ahead.
Okay, so outside of the terrifying use cases, I know I started off with like AI is the boogeyman. Just on a personal level, because one of my first jobs, I was an elementary school teacher. There was an app that Google actually released. It was called Bolo at first, and then it became Read Along. And it's a free app in the Android store for students who are struggling with reading at their grade level. So you could go to the app and you could read to it out loud, and it would give you like a Siri, but it was like a kid's version, and it would give you real-time feedback as you were reading to it, like based on the way you were reading. So like you could literally be behind, have a stutter, not know how to pronounce certain words, and not have to experience like the embarrassment of being in the classroom trying to do it with all the kids laughing. And you could just do it on like an Android device, which is really accessible when you go outside of the US market. So I think it ended up getting adopted for like, I think it was something like 20 languages. It ended up with like 30 million users. There was a use case of this kid in Africa who was like 2 grade levels behind who caught up. So I personally just love that use case where it wasn't set out to make any money. I mean, it didn't make any money. It was a completely free app, but it was just a use case of how can we make sure that AI is being used to level the playing field. In a similar note, when I use large language models like ChatGPT or BARROOD, one of my favorite ways to use it is to ask it to make information more relevant to me. So I'm a huge basketball fan, if you can't tell by my basketball shoes on right now. And so when there's a concept that maybe I'm struggling with, for example, what is a large language model on a technical level? And then it gives me some like linear algebra answer. I'm like, no. Explain it to me like I'm a 5th grader using a basketball analogy, and it will do it. And so then I'm able to take information that previously would have been inaccessible to me. I would have had to have synthesized it and then gather that information in a way that is relevant in my information reality. So I find that really helpful. I encourage all of you to do that when you're prompting, to ask it to explain it at a certain grade level, and then like in using an analogy of something that you like. That's my favorite way to use these big language model things.
I love that. I mean, and just the prospect of personalized learning.
Yes.
Right. I mean, on steroids, right? It's really the prospect is really hopeful there, right? And your Jordans. And so let's talk a bit about ethics. I know you've mentioned this a bit. An example the other day was given to me where a recruiter could upload his or her voice, and then his AI will digest a resume and have a follow-up phone call. The AI will make a phone call to that candidate, ask them probing questions because the recruiters are too lazy apparently, and see if there's a match for the job. I thought that was really novel, but when I thought about it and mentioned that to other people, they thought, clearly implications arise. So let me just mention that example, and then let's go back this way. X, why don't you talk about some of the biases and some of the challenges that will face AI and GPTs going forward?
So in the example you gave, I'm already still in my Google risk assessment mindset of oh God, turn that thing off ASAP. A huge part of the risk that we have is something called machine bias, which is where humans tend to believe that machines are better than them at tasks, are better than them at things. But the concept of artificial intelligence is to teach machines how to think and act like humans. It doesn't mean that they're better than us or that they're going to be better than us. The same way that maybe I learn how to tie my shoes by making the bunny ears and then tying them, and James might learn by tying the knot and then making the bunny ears and tying them. We're going to learn differently based on our own experiences and environments, and the way we perform a task might be different. It's the same thing with this AI that's coming out, is that it has the same capability to be just as flawed as individual people. And because fairness is not a universal concept, I myself am LGBTQ. My mother is a very, very loving woman. She's also diehard Christian and does not agree with me being gay. Well, if I made an AI and I asked the AI, is being gay right? If it gave me an answer that affirmed me, it wouldn't be fair to her. If it gave an answer that affirmed her, it wouldn't be right for me. So when you're dealing in having AI that can reflect on societal concepts or reflect on human behavior in a way especially that either defines and shapes what is right and wrong, whether someone is a right and wrong fit for a job, whether or not somebody is a right or wrong fit to qualify for a home loan, whether someone is a right or wrong parent to be able to keep their child, whether somebody is deserving or not deserving of a medical treatment, you absolutely have to have human oversight. And there are certain places where, even though the machines may be able to do it faster, it doesn't mean that they're doing it better, that they're making the decisions better than we are. And so I think that one of the things that we desperately need in this country is a more collective calling for regulation on these models, for regulation on how they are tested. Other industries already have stringent requirements. Before a new drug goes on the market that might kill people or severely harm people, it has to go through extensive years of testing and trials. Before a new part comes out for an airplane that, you've spent way too much time on to make sure it doesn't end up exploding or messing us up, it goes through tons of testing. Well, none of that exists for algorithms. And there was actually an article that came out in the New York Times last week. It was by Nico Grant that actually documented how both Microsoft and Google are acknowledging that they're releasing these BARDs and ChatGPTs knowing that they're biased, knowing that they're not safe, but they're like, who cares, because we want to beat the other one to get it out. Microsoft wants to beat Google, Google wants to beat Microsoft, so we'll take all the safety shortcuts because there's nothing forcing them to be able to think critically about these things or test them or make them accountable and auditable to the public, which is terrifying considering that everyone's now turning them on in their businesses. I'll pause there.
Great point. Let's shift to Liz. Liz, how do you view these implications? And I know your company is Estonian. How do they view it, and how does Europe view it? Talk to us about that perspective.
Well, it's interesting in Estonia as a country, and I know I'm painting it to be like this magical place, which it is in a lot of ways, but people own their own data there, which is in and of itself an amazing concept that I think in a country like the US, we just give our data away for free willy-nilly to everybody and don't realize the consequences of that. I couldn't agree enough, in addition to the New York Times story that you referenced, X, there was also an article in Wired last week that was talking about how we desperately need governmental oversight of AI. I think some people cringe when they hear about rules, regulation, oversight, but it's absolutely important. And I think another dimension that we can talk about as we look at ethics is also the intellectual property problem of generative AI. So this is something that I think Friday there was an HBR article about this. So I know Brian Collins was talking about Midjourney and DALL-E in his presentation. I remember I was in Berlin in December, and there were a lot of art galleries that I was visiting, and they all had big signs in the windows saying that they had human-created art, so it was not generated by AI. So are we going to now place a premium or some special value on art that has been created by a person rather than by AI, not to mention the fact that who owns the intellectual property of such things? Should AI play role in the total creation or partial creation or inspiration for that piece? So that to me is a kind of vexing moral dilemma.
Thanks, Liz. AVIAD?
Well, it's interesting because I think we are all biased, but we are much more tolerant to biased by people than biased by machines. And it's an interesting dilemma that we can discuss. Talking about the IP challenge, it's highly relevant for us because if we look at generative AI, we can talk about creativity. Is it real creativity? What the difference between machine creativity and human creativity? But after all, when we ask the machine to design something, in order to be able to make this design, the machine is actually looking through a huge data set, actually, which with all the historical designs that were done in the past, whether it's a car or a building or whatever. In a similar way, like an architect who is actually get inspiration from works of Frank Lloyd Wright or any other architect. But when the machine is doing it, we expect to see the kind of the IP topic solved. And this is certainly an interesting issue with no clear solution yet that we are dealing with at the moment because our tools are looking for those data sets and try to create some sort of a design out of them. And by the way, same with GitHub for Microsoft. The GitHub Copilot is looking for samples of code in order to support the developer with a new code. This new code does not exist, but it came from specific data set which have IP rights. So that's an interesting topic to discuss.
Great, thanks. Okay, so we're going to try to open this up to questions sooner, very soon. So get your questions ready. I'm going to ask one last question of our amazing panel. Give us a future forecast. 5 years from now. It could be good, it could be bad. Where do you think we'll be 5 years from now?
To Liz's point earlier, we are either victims of change or we are shapers of change. And where we end up in the next 5 years is entirely determinant on what we end up doing in the next year and a half. I think that AI is going to be a critical piece of every industry. Most of the functions that we see today will be gone, whether they're data analysis, low-level coding, whether it's writing. Most of those positions that are mundane and repeatable easily by an AI now will probably be gone. So what will we create instead? Do we want to protect certain jobs or fields? Will we push for regulation that's actually comprehensive? Or if you watch the TikTok trials, wait for those people to figure out how we should regulate it, right? And so I'm hopeful for the future. I think as more people start to understand how this technology works, which a lot of you play a role in as marketers, users don't trust incorporating AI when they don't understand it. There's tons of research out there that shows that. So hopefully we get to a point where we can all believe in the superpower of AI and limit its role as a supervillain in our societies.
Great, thank you, X. Liz?
Yeah, and thinking optimistically, in the next 5 years, I hope to see data science taught in all public schools in America from elementary school, if not sooner. I think I hear a lot of people when they talk about technology, talk about coding, or I brought up technology in a recent school board conversation in my town, and people were referring to it as IT. I'm like, I'm not talking about IT. I'm talking about everyone needs to have a fundamental understanding of data science, and this is what will enable us to stay in control of the narrative and of the future. So with that, I think that the technology like AI is typically referred to as an exponential technology. So it can make our lives exponentially better, or if things slip in the wrong direction, exponentially worse. And that decision is really up to us. And yes, we need to have thoughtful leaders and governments and definitely the right regulations and controls in place. But I think that we are at a very critical tipping point of things starting to cascade one way or another, but it's really all up to us.
Thanks, Liz. AVIAD?
Yeah, I think that it will democratize a lot of aspects of our life. Just imagine the exercise that Collins did to us earlier, drawing a figure. You know, you can write a text today and get a quite professional output from the system, and this will advance in the future in a similar way. Video editing or any other technology or process that you are challenged by today, AI assist processes can certainly improve your output. On the industrial side, I think it will really free the human workforce from those kind of dull, dangerous, repeatable tasks. So they can focus on more high-level tasks and perform, improve efficiency and improve productivity for the industry.
Great. One last question. As the thought leaders in this audience, the business leaders, tech leaders, marketing leaders, and voters in this audience, what should we do to help us get to a safer, more productive future?
Regulation, regulation, regulation. The U.S. has had multiple call for comments on their proposed AI regulation. The DoD has one out. Go take a look at it. You're going to see it doesn't require things like, we should tell you when we're using an AI, which I think should be like a basic requirement. Go look at the EU's regulation, their proposed AI Act, which is really awesome, in my opinion. It's got really stringent data. Push for the things that you want to see. Call your legislators. I'm sure that ChatGPT can write your letter to your legislator if you don't want to do it, and even give you their email so that you can comment them, and then you can Zapier it together to send it off automatically and just email them every day. But seriously, I think one is educating yourself. It's not anyone else's responsibility to come and teach us how to shape the society that we are now active members of for those who come after this, so that when my 10 nieces and nephews are in these kinds of rooms in 10, 20 years, are they going to say, why didn't you do more? Right? It's not their job to carry the weight of what we should be doing now. So I highly encourage folks to get involved in the active legislative discussions. There are also legislative discussions happening at the state and at the city level. For example, the city of Berkeley has banned facial recognition technology, even though the state of California has not. So there are opportunities for you to shape at every level how this technology is being used. It's up to you to decide. So you can either be a victim of that change or you can actually be an active shaper of it.
Where do you each come down on pausing? There's been a letter written by, or signed by 1,000 leaders. Does pausing make sense? Is it reasonable?
Please pause. Seeing what I've seen, and I'm not going to end up getting sued here, but just seeing what I've seen internally at Google across all of their algorithms, if a company that big that has been doing this for decades struggles to make algorithms that are free from bias in the most basic ways, and then now they're taking even more shortcuts to bring things to market, we absolutely need to pause. We need to make sure that whatever we're creating is created intentionally and usefully and not doing things that may or may not be illegal by U.S. civil rights laws.
Okay. Liz?
So last year, Congress considered an Algorithmic Accountability Act. This is something else that you can specifically read and get yourself familiar with. And to X's point, you can contact your congressperson and let them know your thoughts about this one way or another, so we can get our voices heard. And then just generally educate yourself on AI if you have not. There's a great website called Elements of AI that was created by the University of Helsinki, and an e-learning site called Mina Learn. It's free, it's open source, it seems to have reasonably good information. So whether it's that or another source, just to get to know the language and the terminology and what things mean so that you can have educated conversations with everybody around you, including your representatives, so we can, again, guide things in the right direction.
Right. AVIAD, last word.
I think posing is not a realistic kind of request. Things will not stop, but we need to accelerate regulation. I think we need to invest in education, in testing, and in good data sets. Yeah, hopefully this will help us minimize the impact.
I'll take a stab at a short response here. The way that I think about AI, just to help you all explain it to your friends and family, if we're teaching machines to think and act like humans, the way I categorize that is across the 5 senses. We have sight, we have hearing, we have smell, taste, and touch. Sight in computer science AI is called computer vision, which is anything that is teaching AI how to see or generate things that we can see. So your dollies, your your Face ID in your phone, that's all computer vision. The hearing is called NLP, natural language processing, which has a bunch of subfields under it. So how do you understand text, take it from text to speech, generates text in response, but that's like across that sense. So those are the 2 biggest AI fields out right now. You have computer vision, which powers my Tesla and the Face ID in your phone. You have NLP, natural language processing, which is basically behind all of these big, large AI generative models. Smell, taste, and touch don't have fancy names. There's just a lot of research papers that are out. When it comes to smell, we still don't understand how the human olfactory system works. So they are trying to, it's like a lot of foundational investigative research of how you can make it mimic smell. When it comes to taste, same thing. How do you make an AI understand taste? When it comes to touch, it's mostly robotics. So you'll have they'll make synthetic skin that can detect pressure and heat and stuff like that. So that's kind of how I explain it to my friends and family. In terms of the hallucinations is what they're called in the computer science field. When a generative model generates something that is wrong or it makes it up, it's called a hallucination, which a colleague of mine at Google, Timnit Gebru, called out in the paper she got fired for, Stochastic Parrots, where she warned that these large language systems are not intended to be authoritative sources. The way that a large language model is trained is to understand the context of what you give it, your prompt, and then generate human-like conversation in response. Well, how many times have we had conversation with somebody, or if you see all of the debates online where someone's like, well, studies say this happened, and then you're like, what studies? And then they're like, but you should just Google it. You could look it up, right? Humans also have that kind of a response. So that's what I was saying earlier, where they might be faster than humans, but they're not necessarily better. So I think that when we're using AI for self-educational purposes, one, you can always ask it for a source, but you have to double check it. Same way I could tell you right now that I just heard Joe Biden around the corner in a coffee shop say that AI is the greatest thing ever. You got to check my sources because my sources might not always be accurate for the information. So I think when we're engaging these systems, we have to disengage our machine bias and think just because the computer told me it's going to be more accurate than if I'm having a conversation with a person. And so again, as these large language models are coming out and being developed, we still have to have that same vetting process of okay, you told me it was on this podcast, this Joe Rogan episode. Let me go listen to it and then look at the sources and determine the quality for myself. We have to take that with these machines because they're trained to just generate human-like conversation, not to be factual advisors. That's just how we're using them. I'll say one, obviously big tech is going to keep winning, but I think to answer the question that was brought up earlier, what's missing in this, we need companies that are willing to make money that don't want to be billionaire companies. You don't have to be a unicorn, right? There's a lot of use cases that are out in the market that can make you tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars that are just too small in scope for these large companies to put their money behind. So right now there's tons and tons of startup opportunities that serve particular niches or particular groups of communities, whether it's things that are unique to women or things that are unique to certain, identity groups that are just not going to be picked up by a big company. For example, Native Americans are 2% of the US population. There's a lot of problems that could be solved there that a multi-billion trillion dollar company on the stock market is not going to be incentivized to throw $100 million at to try to fix. That doesn't mean you can't build viable businesses that scale, that are sustainable, that bring generational wealth to you, your family. And so I think the willingness to be able to solve problems that big companies are no, that's too small for us, is going to be a whole chain of businesses that we're going to see that are going to really win in the next couple of years, especially.
Thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I think that with a bit of flavor here, but I think that There are some fundamental capabilities which will be kept with the giants potentially because of the heavy investment required to support and develop the solutions. But I think there's a huge space here, an opportunity for specific vertical markets sitting on top of those horizontal platforms. And as you mentioned, for small startups with unique ideas, how to serve specific population with AI-based solutions.
I hope that there are companies that don't exist today that we've never heard of that are yet to be incubated and founded that are going to be playing a big part of the dialogue in 5 years. There was also an index report that came out that I encourage everyone to download. It's quite long, but it's quite good. It came from Stanford University, and it's called the Artificial Intelligence Index Report. And in there, they talk about how Chinese citizens are amongst those who feel the most positively about AI products and services, and Americans feel not so good about this. So if this is true and not something that people were coerced by the government to say, then is it true perhaps that they could start taking a leading role because they're not afraid? They're embracing it and they want to try out and innovate and do different things as opposed to, those of us in other parts of the world. So I thought that was an interesting fact as well, as far as who the winners and losers, if we want to look at it that way, in the next 5 years might be.
Great. One last question. My niece is graduating from the Exec MBA program here. I'm very proud of her. She's here in the audience. For new graduates, quick suggestions. We have 46 seconds. For new graduates, undergrad or grad, to take advantage of this point in time relating to AI.
Use it for your resume. Use it for your LinkedIn. Use it to apply for a bunch of jobs. But make sure you change the text so it doesn't get detected as AI generated.
I think just understanding the strategic use cases of AI for whatever industry you're working in is the fundamentally most important thing. You do not need to be a data scientist or a computer scientist or any of these things. Just know how it could be used and applied, and then also, have some thought around policy and regulation side as well.
I wish I knew. I don't have a good answer here. Just keep yourself agile and look what's going on, because the pace of technological development is so fast today that what you'll start with today will not be what you'll end up in 3 to 4 years from now.
Great. Keep learning. Curiosity. Thank you. This panel has been amazing. Thank you so much. I'm honored to be on the stage with you. Thank you, Matt.